Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be at the conference today, and I've actually had a very, very interesting day talking to a lot of people about what we're trying to do in this space with Diana. And so what I'm going to do today is just spend about 15 minutes to talk to you a little bit about the underpinning reasons and rationale for the whole Diana program, give you an understanding a little bit about what the whole program is about, and then I will describe to you a little bit about where we've got to. I'm quite keen for interactive sessions, so if there's some time for questions, etc., then maybe we can also handle those. Okay, anyway, let's progress then. So, reimagining defense innovation for a new era, a disruptive perspective. So I know that in the sessions today, a lot of ground has been covered with respect to the important topics of cybersecurity and the ethics of cybersecurity and various specific sort of domains of business impact for cybersecurity. But what I wanted to do was just to step back and look at this whole area of security and have a little think about what it is that we're trying to achieve. So the first thing here I wanted to talk about a little bit was this ontology of insecurity. So the root causes of conflict are really a set of complex and interrelated global insecurity problems. This is what we're facing in the world today. So if we look at very basic things like the availability of water, nutrition, natural resources, political and economic instabilities, hostile action from criminals, terrorist organizations, nation states, and issues like the scarcity of energy, all of these elements basically fuse together to create complex ontologies or structures, if you like, of insecurity. And on this graph is a piece of work I did a little while ago at Imperial College, where I'm a professor. I'm actually on leave from being a professor at Imperial College to be the managing director for Diana for the next 3 years. But this is a piece of analysis that we did to sort of look at the interrelatedness, the complexity of this insecurity surface that we face. And so when we think about defense and we think about security and resilience, we must think a little bit about what the overarching goal is. And the goal here is really to address the root causes and symptoms of insecurity so that we can create a better world effectively, right? That's what we're trying to do. And we should also recognize that this is a very, very big challenge. This is a hyper-complex domain, and it requires some of the most sophisticated scientific examinations and efforts that we have at our disposal today. You can see from this chart just how complicated things actually are. And the fact that this is such an interrelated space, and there is so many moving parts, it also motivates us to have a cross-sectoral, interdisciplinary approach, because effectively the ontology compels us to look at this in an interrelated way. And incidents such as the war in Ukraine and other global incidents of today are showing us, including the very recent incidents of things like COVID-19, are showing us just how interrelated everything is. The reason I'm over-egging this point a little bit is because quite often cybersecurity is seen as a domain on its own. And in fact, what I'm trying to get across to you here is there's no such thing. Physical security, cybersecurity, and all of these other factors have deep interrelationships which we have to actually recognize. I should also have said at the beginning of this, I'm a researcher myself in cybersecurity, have been looking at advanced machine learning capabilities in this area for some time too. So some of what I'm talking about here, I know a little bit about what I'm talking about on the technical side as well as the strategic side, just to reassure you that I'm not just making stuff up. So anyway, some historical context as well I wanted to do here, right? Let's step back a little bit. Does anybody recognize who this is? Just a show of hands in a cybersecurity conference. I always ask this question. It's a little bit cheeky, but this is a guy called Norbert Wiener. So Norbert Wiener, after the Second World War, actually coined the term cybernetics. So it was after the Second World War that people started to realize that human beings and machines could collaborate together to effectively deliver the functions of society. And Norbert was one of the people who theorized about this and wrote this book called Cybernetics. And it is from this phrase cybernetics that cybersecurity and our whole domain is actually defined. So it is a very important thing, and I would urge you to take a look at this book, actually, for those of you who have not come across it before. But it is at this moment that we start understanding that our tools are not just simply some mechanical element, but in fact something that could collaborate with us through language, effectively the ones and zeros that our computer systems use. So we've come up to a point in history now, and I'm just trying to paint a landscape of why cybersecurity is so important. We've come up to a point in history now, at this stage, maybe a few decades ago actually, where our tools are enabled with language. We can program them, they can speak ones and zeros, they can take physical actions in the world, and effectively, rather than being our implements, they have become our collaborators, okay? And around about the same time, something else was happening, and people were starting to think about, well, if we can collaborate with our tools, perhaps also we can give our tools intelligence. Perhaps there is a way of making sure that our machines can start being even more sophisticated and thinking a little bit in the same way that human beings might think. And this kicked off the whole sphere of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So way back in the 1950s and the late 40s is where some of this work started. And you have to wait for decades before you actually get to the state of where we are today. And where we are today is in fact that we do have machines that can in a fashion learn, and we are rapidly seeing over the horizon the potential of us having machines with genuine intelligence. This becomes extremely central and exceptionally important for anything to do with cybersecurity today. And the reason it becomes very important, because with all of the technologies that we develop in the world, there's always multiple uses for this technology, right? So if you look at machine learning, quantum-enabled technologies, blockchains, material sciences, a whole list of different things, there are many ways that we could direct the technology to take action in the world. And the really interesting thing here that we have to think about is there are effectively, and this is oversimplifying things, but we have to decide whether or not we want to use our technology for constructive or for destructive purposes at the end of the day. This is the dual nature of technology that we are constantly faced with having to confront as human beings. And it was Richard Feynman who, on the visit to a Buddhist temple, came across this piece of advice, which I think was engraved on a stone, that to each person is given the key to heaven, but the problem is that that same key opens the door to hell. And so there is something very profound there in terms of our responsibility for how we go about developing the technology, not just what we develop. And so we have this choice to make, right? For those of you who are worried that artificial intelligence and machines and robots and all of these things are going to take away control, I've got some good news for you, and that is that you have a lot of control, but the control is based around this choice. Which way will we direct our efforts? And it's a choice that actually many of our researchers and developers choose not to take or not to pay attention to. And machine learning and AI has made us start staring at this very, very carefully, because the ramifications, particularly for our security and our insecurity in the future, are huge. So what do we have? We have nuclear weapons in the world. We have a pathway towards climate destruction, and these are both existential risks for human species. And we have this complex cyber-physical world where our computing systems, human beings, and our machines are collaborating to effectively drive our societies. And if you think about this complex, interrelated world of things, and we think about the risk of conflict inside this space, we realize two things. Because there's more stuff, the likelihood of something going wrong is increased. And because that stuff is interconnected, when something goes wrong somewhere, the contagion effect has got a much higher impact to it as well. So if risk is likelihood multiplied by impact, we can see that the risk of conflict is really greatly increased by this cyber-physical system that we now have, coupled with things like nuclear weapons and climate change. And that is not to say here that there aren't enormous positive things around the technology, okay? I'm not trying to be a doomsayer, but this is a conference about security, so that's why I have to concentrate in this way. And when we talk about conflict and the risk of conflict, of course, what we are starting to do with our autonomous machine learning driven machines is effectively co-opt them in our battles against one another, in our warfare and conflict scenarios. Those might be digital landscape warfare, that might be IP theft, it might be crime, it might be nation and on-state war in the cyberspace, or it might be the war in physical space, or more in keeping with where we are right now, a very deep and complicated blend between the two. And so now our machines have agency to go off and do stuff that we might instruct them to do, but even more importantly in the future, they may have agency to go and decide themselves what they would like to do based on the data and the information that they see. And we have to decide whether that's what we want. So what we really need is to figure out a way of developing technologies in the future such that we pick the technologies and the technology pathways that bring down that risk of conflict. And that means making sure that our technologies can bring down the likelihood as well as bringing down the impact. So you could think about the fact that we need cybersecurity solutions that might prevent certain attacks from happening, might bring down insecurity levels in some way, as well as building the cybersecurity solutions to detect when an attack is happening or to take mitigating action once an event is in place. And this is what I'm going to define to you as being genuinely dual use. And it's for this purpose that we created DIANA, which is the Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic. And that is effectively to create a program for funding and supporting startups and innovators who can identify technologies that can serve that dual purpose of mitigating risk. And that applies to cybersecurity and any other security domain that you might want to think of. And I hope what I'm trying to show you, and what I'm getting across to you here, is that cybersecurity for me is not a vertical activity, but is in fact something that proliferates nearly everything that we do. So DIANA is designed to fund, support, and to create a network for startups across NATO's footprint. We're designed to convene triple helix stakeholders from academia, industry, and government in a rich innovation ecosystem that includes test centers and an accelerator program, which is going to grow rapidly in the next few years. We've just completed the first call for our first cohort of startups, which I'll cover briefly in a second. You can visit our website and see some of these maps, but it'll show you a footprint of where our accelerator sites for these startups are going to be over the next few years, and where we've already got some accelerator sites. You'll also see where our testing and development centers are going to be, effectively developing a DevSecOps cycle for those of you who understand how to do rapid agile development, so that we can very quickly get these technologies actually doing real work in the real world. And our pilot year has involved these three different challenge areas: sensing and surveillance, energy resilience, and secure information sharing, all of which actually involve some element of cybersecurity or cyber component to them. So I've only got a couple of minutes left, so a quick report of where we've got to. We've just closed the calls. We received something like 1,300 applications across the nations, spanning all of the three challenge areas, and here are just some graphs showing you the splits between the different challenge domains. So this is the first year that we've run that. 1,300 applications was a really great response. And we are now in the process of actually down selecting the final few, well, the first companies, the first cohort that would start the acceleration program in January. I think what I want to try to get across to you is that the first part of this talk was about some theoretical thought leadership stuff, which you maybe thought was going to go nowhere. But the second part of this talk is about what we've actually done to address the problem. And I'm really going to try and encourage you all to connect with us. I'll leave you the links to the website, etc., to help us to grow this program in the coming years, because unless we pursue this kind of pathway, our proposition is that currently the way things work is not really optimal for the problems that we're facing today, and they certainly will not be optimal for the problems that we'll face in the future. So I'm going to leave you with this little example of why this is so important. So this is the last glass of water in the world, and we all need a drink. So there's two ways of solving this problem, broadly speaking. We can create more water, which is kind of hard. We have to think very carefully how we might do that. Or we can all fight for it, which is the other solution. And it tends to be the case that these days we still end up doing the second solution in preference to the first. And so we have to recognize that conflict, however it manifests itself in the digital or physical space, is a reminder of our failure to achieve the highest aspirations that we have in terms of problem solving, okay? It is a symptom of our inability to be as inventive as we'd want to be, and it should be the thing that motivates us to drive us forward towards positive solutions and to create a more peaceful world on a planetary level. And problems like, climate change are basically forcing us to look at that. Some of us choose not to look, but it'll come and find you anyway, whether you look or not. So I'm going to end there. I think that's probably my 15 minutes or so, not far off. You can scan the QR code here if you like. This will take you to our website. We will have registration pages for mentors and people, places for you to connect with our program over the coming months. I'm the managing director of a startup myself, which is DIANA. Diana is the first startup of the program, so we are building the aeroplane as we fly it. In fact, we're still ordering some of the parts, so you will bear with us if there are some things which are not quite as polished as they should be. But in the next 2 to 3 years, we're hoping to reach our full operational capacity, and we're really hopeful that some of you in the audience will join us on that journey. And with that, I'm going to close, say thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you so much, Professor Deeph. I'm going to keep you because we still have 2 minutes. C'est rare. I have time maybe for one question, otherwise it's going to be like during the break. But s'il y a quelqu'un qui a envie de poser une question, qui va être le chanceux? À vous l'honneur, le micro est là. Mais le temps passe, donc j'ai le temps pour une seule question. Là, tout le monde est gêné. Oui, yeah, go. Okay, great. J'ai toujours un gêné.
Because you have to walk over there. That's why. That's
I know.
Yeah, it's a bit intimidating.
Based on all the submissions, what do you think? What excites you in terms of the submissions and the different categories, and especially the space category, or anything that is at the top of your mind?
So I think space is going to be definitely a domain of greater focus next year. I should say the funding program will run every year. Okay, so we will be running challenges every year. The thing that excites me more than anything is that what I've just explained to you is the thought proposition that we put out to the market to see what the response would be like. And we got 1,300 applications. So it was a little bit nerve-wracking to say, look, we're going to try and reimagine what defense, security, and this whole narrative in S&T, science and technology, is going to look like, and then see if anybody was going to respond. And actually, the heartening thing is that we got such a great response. The second thing is that the quality of those respondents, I think, on the whole, having run these kind of calls many times in my career, the quality was really in the right place. So it gives us lots of hope, in fact, that this isn't just going to be 1, 2, 3, 5 year thing, but something that is going to be lasting for a lot longer than that and driving change. I hope that answers the question anyway.
Professor CHANA, thank you so much.
No problem. Okay, it's a real pleasure.